Black Sheep looks like the easiest sell in the world. Chris Farley and David Spade back together. More chaos, more stunts, more lines you can quote before the scene even ends. It feels like a victory lap, like the fun should be automatic the second they share the frame. But behind it, this one was built like an emergency. It was treated like Tommy Boy's follow-up, built to chase the same hit without the same magic. The shoot carried real tension, enough to make the partnership feel fragile off camera, and by the end, it did something worse than flop or win. It helped lock Farley inside the version of himself Hollywood kept demanding. These are 10 weird facts about Black Sheep, the comedy that did not just stumble, it tightened the trap around the funniest man in the room. Number 1. Black Sheep doesn't play like a normal next movie, it plays like a second lap. Like a film that already knows the audience is walking in for the same pairing, the same contrast, the same energy. And it's built to deliver that comfort before anyone has time to ask for something new. Because in a lot of ways, it was treated like a sequel. After Tommy Boy proved Chris Farley and David Spade could sell tickets together, Paramount Pictures didn't look at them like a creative partnership that needed time to find the next story. They looked at them like momentum, a window that could close, and studios don't wait politely for windows, they rush. So the goal wasn't what's the best next Farley Spade movie, the goal was how fast can we run that engine again. That urgency shows up in the blueprint. Black Sheep is built on the same skeleton on purpose. A lovable disaster gets paired with a straight-laced handler. The handler's job is babysitting and damage control. The disaster keeps making everything worse. Then, almost by accident, the disaster collides with a larger conspiracy and becomes the unlikely hero. It's the same basic mechanism, just repainted with new locations, new villains, and one simple goal: no risk, reliability. And that hurry didn't just shape the script, it shaped the whole production. Number 2. By late April 1995, Paramount was staring at a contract date that could let Chris Farley walk, not later, not someday, that weekend. So the studio stopped acting like a studio and started acting like a legal department. They didn't need a great screenplay, they needed a document, something they could drop on a desk and say, "We're in motion," before the door closed. That's when Fred Wolf got pulled in, and the pressure wasn't subtle. He was warned Paramount would sue if he didn't deliver a draft by midnight on April 30th, 1995, a hard deadline. So Wolf did what anyone does when the clock is a weapon. He wrote fast, he delivered fast. The draft came in at around 45 pages, which is basically a confession. A feature script is usually roughly double that length. 45 pages isn't a movie, it's an outline wearing dialogue, a skeleton designed to prove something exists, not to prove it's good. Farley read it and saw the problem immediately, not in a "I don't like this joke" way, in a structural survival way. He could tell it was unfinished and being forced into production anyway. The embarrassment was already forming, and he didn't try to dodge work. He asked for the one thing that could actually save it: time. He pushed to delay production until summer 1996 so the material could be expanded, tightened, and turned into a real feature instead of frantic noise. Paramount refused, because for them, this wasn't about making a better movie anymore. It was about keeping their star. They needed the project in motion to lock the contract, even if the pages were thin and the story wasn't ready. And while Paramount forced the movie forward, another door cracked open at the same time: the alternate version of Farley's career, the one Paramount couldn't afford. Number 3. For a minute, Hollywood wasn't just laughing at him, Hollywood was calling him. He was at the peak of his fame. The expressions, the physical lightning, audiences loved him, and studios could feel money in that love. So offers started showing up that didn't look like the same old buddy handler lane. They looked like exits. Picture door number 1, Farley in Kingpin as the Amish boy. Not a buddy handler template, not the big guy wrecks everything engine. A stranger, more character-driven kind of funny. Innocence, oddball sincerity, the kind of role where his sweetness isn't a side effect, it's the point. That part could have widened him overnight because it asks the audience to laugh at the situation, not just the size of the performer. Now picture door number 2. Columbia Pictures was interested in making him the star of a project called The Cable Guy. At that moment, the movie wasn't locked in as Jim Carrey's dark comedy in the public mind. It was still forming, and Farley had a shot at being the face of it. A new studio, a new lane, a move that signals, I'm not just the guy you plug into the same formula. That's the alternate timeline. Farley pivots, he stretches, he gets seen differently before the industry seals the label. Then, the real timeline shows up, because Paramount didn't look at those opportunities like good for Chris, they looked at them like danger. If Farley leaves, their rushed movie collapses, their plan collapses, their control collapses. So the pressure came down hard. Don't go, stay here, make our film. And once that happened, the door didn't just close, it got slammed. And when Farley finally says yes to staying, it isn't a casual yes. It comes with leverage, a demand for protection. Number 4. Farley said yes to Black Sheep, but only if the movie came with a guardrail. He didn't just want the role, he wanted control over the one thing that could keep the whole production from going sideways, the director. So he drew a line for Paramount. If they wanted him, they needed someone he trusted behind the camera, someone who wouldn't let him get hung out to dry if the material wasn't ready. That person was Penelope Spheeris. Farley had worked with her on Wayne's World, and the relationship mattered. He trusted her rhythm. He trusted her instincts. He knew she wouldn't let him get turned into the joke. So it wasn't a polite request. It was leverage. Hire her or lose him. Paramount understood the math instantly. If they lost Spheeris, they risk losing Farley, and if they lost Farley, the whole project collapses. So they didn't just hire her, they bought certainty. Spheeris was promised around $2.5 million, and that number flipped the power structure before the cameras even rolled. She was making more than Farley and Spade. That meant her authority wasn't just creative, it was contractual. She didn't have to negotiate tone with the stars. She could steer the movie from the top because the studio needed her locked in to keep Farley locked in. So, Farley didn't just pick a director. He forced Paramount into a deal where the director became the highest paid person in the room because she was the only one who could keep their star from walking. The check bought control. It didn't buy peace. Number 5. Once Penelope Spheeris was locked in, the power on that set changed immediately. She didn't treat the existing script like something to gently refine. She moved like someone hired to rebuild it. 2 new writers came in. Large chunks of pages got replaced. Jokes got reamed. Scenes got reshaped. The message was clear without anyone saying it. The movie was getting engineered from the top, not discovered by the duo. That's where the original writers started disappearing. Fred Wolf wasn't a random name on a draft. He was the guy Paramount leaned on when the clock was ticking, the one pulled into the midnight pressure to get pages on a desk fast enough to keep the project alive. But once Spheeris took control, his voice stopped being protected. She reportedly refused to hear his suggestions and wouldn't even speak with him, which meant he couldn't adjust scenes, punch up, or defend structure while the movie kept moving. He got fired, brought back, fired again, brought back again, fired again, 3 times, not as a clean exit, but as a repeated shove that tells you the process was unstable. The script wasn't being polished, it was being fought over. And you can feel the fallout where the movie needed stability the most, the Farley-Spade engine. The film is sold as a duo ride, yet it keeps separating them, letting the story wander away from the 2-person rhythm that made the last movie work. Even the tone of the collaboration got personal. Spheeris openly loved Farley, and she reportedly despised Spade, describing one as lovable and positive, and the other as bitter and negative. On a comedy, that bias doesn't stay private. It shows up in what gets protected, what gets cut, and who gets the oxygen. So the studio paid Spheeris as the star to keep the movie alive, and once she arrived, the movie stopped being Farley and Spade building it together. It became a tug-of-war with cameras rolling. Number 6. This is where the movie stopped feeling like work and started feeling like risk. The script wouldn't hold still, the clock wouldn't slow down, and Farley could feel the floor shifting under every scene. Spade kept reaching for the old solution. On their last movie, they'd survived messy pages by fixing things in real time, improv punch-ups between takes, scenes reshaped while the camera was already hungry. That experience taught them a dangerous lesson. If the set stays loose enough, you can find the movie while you're making it. Spade thought they could do that again. Farley didn't, because this time the conditions were different. The script was still being pulled in multiple directions. The schedule was tight. The tone was being controlled from the top instead of discovered in the moment. The room wasn't flexible in the way that makes fix-it on set possible. And when that flexibility disappears, you don't get to improvise your way out. So Farley built his own safety net during production. After hours, he started holding private punch-up sessions with writers. Extra shifts, not for fun, not as a casual tweak, as emergency prep. He spent his off hours tightening bits, sharpening jokes, strengthening moments he was about to walk back on set and perform, because he didn't trust the pages he was being handed to protect him. That's the part people miss about Farley.
Number 7. Around the shoot, Farley was in a serious but rocky relationship with Lori Bagley, the actress and model many people remember from the pool scene in Tommy Boy. The twist isn't that he was dating someone, it's how it hit David Spade. Spade felt blindsided. He thought he'd introduced them, and he thought he and Bagley were close. Worse, he didn't find out in some clean, honest conversation. He found out by accident. That's the kind of discovery that doesn't just sting for a day. It changes how you read your friend. It changes what you trust. Now drop that into this exact moment. The script is still being fought over. The set is tense. Farley is already anxious enough to be doing after-hours punch-ups. And on top of all that, the relationship between the two guys who are supposed to sell the movie starts carrying real friction. Farley would go back to the hotel room he shared with Bagley during filming and vent about it, reportedly even blaming the situation for the fallout, saying she was the reason he and his best friend weren't talking. That's not gossip, that's a crack in the engine. Because when a movie depends on two people bouncing off each other, anything that shifts the friendship shifts the timing. The pauses change, the patience changes. The trust that makes comedy effortless turns into something you have to fight through. Number 8. When production ended, it wasn't relief. It was the moment the noise stopped long enough for the doubt to get loud. Farley didn't walk away from Black Sheep feeling proud. He walked away uneasy, like the film had been rushed into existence, like he'd been asked to hold it together with personality instead of a real foundation. And that uneasiness didn't fade once the cameras shut off. In 1995, he wasn't coming back for the season premiere of Saturday Night Live. It didn't get framed like a dramatic public firing, but it still functioned like a clean cut. A new regime came in. His style wasn't valued the same way, and suddenly the weekly structure that had anchored him was gone. That matters because SNL wasn't just a job for Farley. It was routine, purpose, a place where his energy had a schedule and a team and a reason. Losing it right after a shaky shoot meant he didn't get to outrun his anxiety by throwing himself back into the next week's work. He had to sit with it. That's why the preview screening in New Jersey lands like a scene, not an anecdote. Paramount held a rough-cut screening, and Farley attended with his brother Tom. Even before the lights went down, Tom could feel Chris was bracing himself. Not excited, not curious, guarded like he already knew this wasn't going to be a fun night. But that's not the headline, it's the picture. A star walking into his own preview screening, already bracing for impact, already carrying private panic like armor. Because this wasn't just seeing the movie early, this was the moment where the doubt stopped being theoretical, where he had to sit in the dark and feel in real time whether the thing he feared was true. And once you're sitting there already panicking in the dark, the reviews don't change the feeling, they amplify it. Number 9. Bad reviews are supposed to hit the film. This time, they hit the die. A lot of the criticism didn't sound like this comedy didn't work. It sounded like a verdict on Chris Farley. Not funny, not talented, just a guy running around screaming and falling down. Even the lines that looked like they were defending him still landed like a knife. What a waste of the talent of Chris Farley and David Spade. As if the movie didn't fail, the people did. Then it went public. On Siskel and Ebert, Gene Siskel didn't talk about structure or direction. He went straight for Farley. He said, "I knew John Belushi. I knew John Candy. He's no John Belushi or John Candy." That isn't a review, that's a demotion on national TV. And he made it physical. He described Farley as someone who just screams and rolls on the ground like a fat man, turning Farley's whole style into a body insult instead of a comedy critique. He just runs around, screams, and rolls on the ground. This movie is very, very bad. The cruel part is how the segment teases mercy and then crushes it. Roger Ebert tries to soften the blow. He says performers are often at the mercy of the material, and Farley could be very funny with the right writing. Yeah, but on the other hand, he doesn't have a chance with this script, which is totally I have never seen him be funny with any script. Okay, well, maybe not. Then Siskel adds the walkout detail like it's proof. He says he left the theater with about 20 minutes still remaining, and frames it as the first time in decades he'd walked out on a movie he was assigned to review. This is the first movie that I have ever walked out on in a theater in 26 years. So it wasn't just 2 thumbs down, it was Farley's whole identity getting judged in public, right when he already felt the ground shaking under him. Number 10. By the time Black Sheep was over, the damage wasn't only a weak movie. For Farley, it felt like confirmation. Hollywood wasn't seeing the full person. Not the sweetness, not the timing, not the vulnerability he could sneak into a joke when the material let him breathe. The industry kept seeing the same surface version and rewarding only that version. The fall, the scream, the big body chaos. And once a system decides that's what you are, the offers don't open up, they tighten. Farley wanted to grow, he wanted to be taken seriously, but the work that came calling kept dragging him back into the same lane, louder and more frantic, built around the same punchline. The message under it is the part that poisons you. You're loved, but only in this shape. Live inside that long enough and it stops feeling like typecasting. It starts feeling like a cage. People around Farley described his addiction getting harder to contain. More relapses, more time and treatment, then back to work, then back to the pressure. Stability showing up only in short bursts before it slipped away again, and the physical toll started showing in public. When Farley returned to host Saturday Night Live in 1997, the difference is hard to unsee. The spark is still there, but he looks worn down, his voice sounds rough, he gets winded sooner. The smile still shows up, but it feels like effort, like he's reaching for the old force of nature version of himself, and his body is quietly resisting. And while the public only saw the loud version, here's the part that makes the story snap. Because right when the world was still treating him like a spectacle, Farley was quietly building the one role that could have rewritten the way millions of people understood him, Shrek. Not as the fat guy, not as the fall, not as the scream, as a character with a bruise under the jokes, a big defensive shell wrapped around something painfully soft, warmth, shame, loneliness. That voice was finally letting him do what he'd been trying to prove he could do all along, make people laugh, then hit them with a real feeling they didn't see coming. And he was deep into it. He had recorded most of his dialogue. He was already shaping the rhythm, the tone, the heart of the character. Then the door closed. Chris Farley died on December 18, 1997, at 33. So the cruel irony is this. The industry kept pushing him to play the loud version of himself while he was in the middle of giving them the quietest proof that he was always more than that. He didn't get to finish the role, but you can still feel what it was going to be.